Winter settled over the valley earlier than anyone could remember. By the first week of November, the old Hawthorne Road had disappeared beneath frozen mud and drifting snow. Mail stopped arriving. Delivery drivers refused to travel that far. Even locals avoided the narrow lane winding through the black pine forest. At the end of that forgotten road stood a house no map acknowledged. It had no number, no mailbox, no records. Yet everyone in the nearby village knew exactly where it was. They simply called it Goodbye House. Not because people died there, because everyone who entered eventually heard someone say goodbye. Elias Carter laughed the first time he heard the story. He was 29, a documentary filmmaker who specialized in exposing urban legends. Ghosts, haunted hotels, cursed churches. Every location became another episode proving fear was little more than clever storytelling. When an elderly librarian quietly mentioned Goodbye House during an interview, Elias smiled politely while pretending to believe every word. She noticed. "You think it's another haunted building. I think grief makes people hear what they need." She nodded. "It doesn't give you what you need. It gives you what you never heard." Those words stayed with him longer than he admitted. Not because he believed them, because they reminded him of his father. 10 years earlier, his father had walked out during an argument. The last thing Elias ever heard was, "I'm done." An hour later, a truck crossed the center line. There had never been another conversation. No apology. No forgiveness. Just silence. 3 days later, Elias parked beside the abandoned forest road. His cameraman refused to continue. "So this is where I stop." "What?" "I'm serious. You don't believe ghost stories." "I don't." "Then, I believe people disappear around here." Elias rolled his eyes. "You coming?" "No." The engine never turned off. His cameraman waited behind the wheel while Elias continued alone with a backpack, camera, batteries, and one handheld flashlight. Snow muffled every footstep. The forest felt unnaturally quiet. Even birds seemed unwilling to disturb the silence. After nearly 40 minutes, he finally saw the house. It wasn't large. 2 stories. Weathered gray wood. Broken porch. Dark windows reflecting nothing but white snow. It looked abandoned for decades. Yet smoke drifted lazily from the chimney. Elias frowned. Someone had to be inside. He knocked. No answer. The front door slowly creaked inward. The interior smelled strangely warm. Old cedar. Dust. Burning firewood. The fireplace glowed gently despite the house showing no signs of recent visitors. Furniture remained perfectly arranged. A kettle rested over glowing embers. 2 teacups waited on the table. 1 chair pulled back, as though someone had stood only moments before. Elias. He froze. Someone had whispered his name. Softly. Behind him. He turned. Nothing. Only the empty hallway. His recorder captured everything. Every creaking board. Every breath. Every whispered syllable. Yet when he replayed the audio, there was no voice. Only silence. He explored room after room. Each looked untouched. No dust disturbed. No footprints. No photographs. No clocks. Nothing revealing who had lived there. Only one object appeared in every room. An empty wooden chair. Always facing the doorway. Always waiting. Upstairs he discovered the bedroom. A single rocking chair faced the window. It moved gently. Forward. Backward. Forward. Backward. No wind entered through the sealed glass. Still, it never stopped moving. Elias lifted the camera. "This is impossible." The chair immediately stopped. Perfectly still. He lowered the camera. It began rocking again. Slowly. Patiently. Like someone invisible had resumed sitting there. Then he heard it. A voice. His father's voice. Exactly as he remembered. Older. Tired. Elias. His hands began shaking. "Dad." Silence. Then, "I'm sorry." Those 2 words shattered something inside him. They were the words he had imagined hearing every night for 10 years. The apology that never came. The apology that couldn't exist. Because his father had died before saying it. The voice came again. "I'm waiting." From upstairs. Even though he already stood on the highest floor. Someone, or something, was speaking from above the ceiling. Elias stared upward. There was no third floor. Only an old plaster ceiling crossed by thick wooden beams. Yet his father's voice had come from somewhere above it. "I'm waiting." The words were calm, patient, not threatening, just waiting. He climbed onto the rocking chair and pressed his ear against the ceiling. Nothing. No footsteps. No movement. No breathing. Only silence. Then the voice whispered again. "Open it." A narrow square outline became visible beneath years of cracked paint. An attic hatch. There was no ladder. Only an old brass ring. Elias reached up and pulled. The wooden hatch swung downward with a long groan. A folding ladder unfolded by itself. One section at a time. Until it touched the floor. His flashlight beam disappeared into complete darkness above. Cold air drifted down. Not the cold of winter. The cold of abandoned hospitals. Forgotten churches. Rooms that had waited too long for someone to return. The attic stretched farther than the house should have allowed. Boxes. Old trunks. Hundreds of wooden shelves. Every shelf held identical black leather journals. Thousands of them. Each spine bore only one name. No dates. No titles. Just names. He ran his fingers across them. Emma Collins. Victor Shaw. Helen Morris. Daniel Price. Hundreds. Thousands. Entire lives. Then, he found one. Elias Carter. His heartbeat stopped. The journal looked brand new. As though it had been placed there moments earlier. He opened it. The first page described the morning he had been born. Every detail. The weather. His mother's laughter. His father's trembling hands. The second page described his first day of school. The third. His first broken bone. Every memory. Every mistake. Every private conversation. Every secret. The book knew everything. Even things he had forgotten. He flipped toward the end. Only 5 blank pages remained. A soft voice spoke behind him. "You came earlier than most." Elias spun around. An elderly woman stood between the shelves. Gray hair. Simple black dress. Gentle smile. She looked like an ordinary grandmother. "What is this place?" "The waiting room." "For what?" She looked around at the endless journals. For unfinished goodbyes. She walked slowly through the attic. Every shelf seemed to continue forever. Everyone leaves something unsaid. A promise. An apology. A confession. A farewell. When they die before speaking those words. The house remembers. Elias stared at the books. So those voices. They are real. They're echoes. Not ghosts. Not souls. Only the final words people carried with them. My father apologized. No, he wanted to. But he never had the chance. The house simply preserved the goodbye he wished he'd spoken. Elias felt tears forming. So why bring people here? Because someone has to hear them. If no one listens, they never disappear. The old woman stopped beside a large window overlooking the forest. Snow fell silently beyond the glass. Most visitors leave after hearing one voice. You didn't. You kept searching. What happens now? She smiled sadly. Now the house chooses. The floor beneath Elias trembled. Every journal opened at once. Pages turned by themselves. Thousands of voices whispered simultaneously. Apologies. Farewells. Names. Promises. The sound grew louder until it became impossible to distinguish one voice from another. Then every whisper stopped. Complete silence. One final sentence echoed through the attic. Will you stay and remember us? The old woman disappeared. Not vanished. Simply, no longer existed. As though she had never been standing there. Only her footprints remained in the dust. Even those slowly faded away. Elias looked back at his own journal. Another page had appeared, blank only moments before. Words slowly formed across the paper. At 4:12 p.m., Elias Carter chose to remain. No. He slammed the book shut. I'm leaving. He ran toward the attic ladder. It was gone. The hatch had vanished. Only solid wooden floor remained. The house had sealed itself. Hours passed. Or perhaps minutes. Time no longer behaved normally. Every room led back to the attic. Every staircase returned him to the shelves. Every window showed the same falling snow. Eventually he stopped running. Exhaustion replaced panic. He sat beside his journal. Another page filled itself. He finally accepted the silence. Then, someone knocked on the front door below. 3 slow knocks. Elias rushed downstairs. For the first time, the front door stood open. Outside stood a young woman, camera around her neck, winter coat covered in snow. Hello. I'm looking for an abandoned house. I heard strange stories. She smiled nervously. I'm making a documentary. Elias stared at her. She looked exactly the way he had looked the day he arrived. You have to leave. I just got here. You don't understand. I've heard that before. She laughed softly. Everyone tells ghost stories. Behind him, the fireplace crackled. A familiar voice drifted through the hallway. Not his father's. His own. Please don't stay. The young woman's smile slowly disappeared. Did someone just call my name? Elias closed his eyes. The house had already begun. It was collecting another goodbye. Months later, villagers noticed something strange. The abandoned house still stood at the end of the road. Smoke still rose from its chimney. Some evenings, a warm light glowed from the upstairs window. If anyone looked carefully, they could sometimes see a man standing behind the glass, watching the road, waiting, not trapped, not entirely, simply listening, because every traveler who wandered inside carried one final conversation they wished had happened. And somewhere above the ceiling, another black journal quietly slid onto an empty shelf. Its cover bore a new name, the filmmaker who came searching for ghosts. The last page had finally been written. Thanks for watching. Follow Story Hub Central for more exciting stories.